Well, welcome everyone. This is the AIXR VR Awards 2020 AMA, and this evening we are joined by MEDIASQUAD GmbH, and they are the winners of the Enterprise Solution of the Year. And without further ado, I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves. So over to you.
So hello, I'm Matthias. I'm the head 3D artist at MEDIASQUAD. And with me is Tobias.
Hi, nice to meet you. I'm the lead programmer from MEDIASQUAD.
It's absolutely wonderful to have you here, and congratulations first and foremost on your win of the award. Obviously a very hotly contested category, that one. The sort of the whole solution as opposed to a one-off experience. Now, I've only seen the video and it looks very shiny, it looks very in-depth, it looks like a great experience. But I was just hoping that you could tell us a little bit more about what actually makes up the BRP Rotax VR job assessment experience.
All right. So basically, we had to solve the issue of our client that they had to make sure that their potential employees are suitable for working in their factory lines. A big problem with that, obviously, with those big heavy machinery which come in motor manufacturing, is that there is quite a lot of it's expensive if people make mistakes, and so you want to make sure that the people that you send to the line to train, they are actually worth it. So what we did was we broke down typical tasks that they have to do in the real workplace, and broke them down so we can let them try them out in VR and judge them based on their performance. The employees at Rotax get a sheet with the score of the applicants, and with that they can judge whether the person is suitable for working there at all, and further in which department they would be best suited to. The whole experience is divided into a few mini games. There are 8 in total, with a tutorial in the beginning, and at the end of that they get their score.
Right, so this is actually aimed at job applicants as opposed to training on the job. This is sorting out the wheat from the chaff of who's potential employee material.
Exactly, yes. To get a rough overview, are you working quickly? Can you remember complicated tasks? Where are you suited to in the production line? Because there are quite a few different tasks that you have to do. And so some people might be suited better for the tasks that take more steps as opposed to the tasks that require fine motor skills, for example.
Right. So before creating your solution, are you able to tell us a little bit about how they were assessing potential candidates beforehand?
Well, what they did basically was do it without any VR solution. So they basically just did the regular application process. You look at resumes and then you try the people out and, well, send them on the production line or in separated areas.
Right, so there's no
easy tasks first.
Right.
And yeah, well.
So there's no sort of practical assessment as part of the interview process. It was just all resume based and hoping that, you know, the resume matched up to what they could actually do, and it was sort of trial, like most jobs, really, just getting on with it and seeing how they succeed.
As far as I know, yes. Maybe there was a bit more. It was a bit more involved, but that's as far as I know. Yes, that was their usual process.
Okay, great. So, I mean, we've dived straight into some questions here, and it's great to hear from you, Mathias. But who are you joined with this evening?
With me is Tobias,
All right.
and he's our lead programmer. Are you all right?
Yeah.
All right.
Sorry, just a small glitch. Yes. Yeah, right. The lead programmer, I did most of the development in terms of getting the idea from being an idea to the actual
Basically breaking
I
down
lost the line.
from the Tobias is responsible for breaking down the concept, which usually gets applied from Chris in our company, who is our CEO, and actually making it work and breaking it down so we can program it out, and also making sure that I, as an artist, can control the flow and keep control over the experience as far as possible without him intervening with coding.
Thanks.
And in terms of design, how long was the overall process?
The process of designing all the interactions and all the fundamentals we did in, I think, 1 week. In 1 week, we assessed the issue that the client actually had, what we can do about it, how is VR fitting for their issues? Is VR the correct medium for solving their problems? And that took a week, a week straight. We also worked at the factory line for 1 day, for 1 whole day, so we can get a feeling of what it's actually like to do these tasks that we ask the applicants to do later. And then it was iterating, I think, the rest of the year. We iterated on the interactions, we iterated on the mini games themselves. The basic concept was like we knew what we wanted to do, I think, after 1 month, and after that it was constantly refining interaction, the user experience, and how certain interactions work in VR. So it was a permanent process.
And that iterative process, did that involve the clients themselves or potential employee candidates, or were you using the workers who would actually gains employment?
Yes, so that was all of that happened, yes, and we did it in steps. In the first step, we created what felt best for us. After we had finished the outline of the project, when we knew what kind of tasks we will be asking the applicants to solve, then we took on designing the mini games. We got them approved, and after that we created the prototypes of all the mini games. This was the first time I think the clients actually were able to try out the experience. They gave us some feedback. We iterated on that, and when we were finished, when we also implemented all the scoring, this was the part. At this point, we got in a lot of their current employees and let them train, let them use it, and kept refining how the scoring works until we were satisfied with it. And after that, we tried it out on new potential employees.
And the client themselves, were they already aware of VR? Were they ready to embrace VR? Did they approach you, or did you approach them with the idea?
Oh, that's a tough question. I'm not sure if we approached them or they approached. I really can't tell you, but I don't think they had used VR before in their at their corporation.
Right.
Yeah, but I'm sorry, I can't. I
That's
don't know
fine.
that.
And in terms of deploying it, what hardware is it using?
Toby, do you want to answer that?
Yeah. Yeah, we using the Vive Pro wireless setup for the actual VR hardware, and we pretty much have pretty beefy gaming PCs in terms of the specs for the computer. So it's a RTX 2080 in there, I think, and some over-the-top i9 processor. So
Exactly, yes.
as much performance as we could pump into the setup.
Well, I mean, looking at the video, it all looks very, you know, high detailed and lots of very shiny reflective surfaces. So I can imagine you'd want, a very high end PC to drive all of that over the Vive Pro. And do they have that
Yes.
set up all the time, or is this something that they set up just for the interview stages?
No, we basically agreed on a setup, setup of specs, and with that was most importantly, I think, the graphics card with the 2080. And from now on, they basically, whenever they want to deploy this somewhere else, they have to provide a PC that meets those specs or exceeds them.
Right.
So yes, we can expect them to have at least the setup that we agreed on.
Mm-hmm. And do they have multiple setups or just one setup?
They have multiple setups because this is a global corporation. They use the whole experience or the assessment in Austria. They use it in Mexico, and there will be more sites in the future. But currently, they use it in Austria and Mexico. Yes.
Right. So being global, did that mean that you had to localize the solution as well?
Yes, that meant we had to localize it in 3 languages, German, English, and Spanish, which meant translating all the in-game the text, and most importantly also the audio, because it doesn't really show in the trailer. The whole experience is from the very beginning to the very end is always accompanied by audio commentary.
Mm-hmm.
So we also had to localize this, which were in total, I think, 500 voice lines for all the 8 games, something like that, in 3 languages, yes.
All right, well, so you said it was 8 sections of the training, of the mini games. I mean, how long is it end to end? If I were to go for an interview beyond obviously face-to-face part, how long would I be in VR?
In VR, in total, I think it's 40 minutes to 50 minutes.
Yeah, around and
there is the
additionally
option
in the middle as a break,
yes.
so the users don't have to be in virtual reality for such an extended period of time.
So they have the option, the side heads, where they can the client can decide this, where we deployed the assessment. They can decide whether they want to ask the user to take a break, or if they want to force them to take a break at the halfway point.
Right.
So the candidates can take a break, come back, continue the rest of the mini games.
Sure. And is it a single or is it a multi-user experience?
This is single user, or well, yeah, you're alone in there basically with the assist voices. Obviously, you're always accompanied by the admin who makes sure that you are safe. But you are alone. There is no multiplayer in there.
Do you see any sort of future use for multi-user sort of team assessment, or allowing the interviewer to go into the space?
I don't think so. At least for this client, I don't think it makes a lot of sense. Given that if you are, what we did with the minigames was basically simulating real-world tasks, and because this is a factory line, your step is basically you're like in a tiny bubble, of your you're all by yourself in your spot in the line, in the assembly line. So you're not dependent on other people. So I don't think this would make a lot of sense.
Right. And you said that you had to go and do some actual work on the production line yourselves as part of your design research process. Did you do all late stages, or was there some parts that were just too dangerous to go in untrained?
Well, I assume there would be some stages that we weren't we wouldn't be suitable or allowed to try out. Those 8 stages are not one-to-one stages in the production. They are loosely based on the tasks that you would have to do.
Sure.
So it's not an accurate representation of the same work. It's inspired, right? But yeah, we did the what's it called? The longest section where you actually have to construct a or assemble a motor while the vehicle is moving through the line. That's more or less what we did. Just what we did was a tiny step of that, and we combined a few more steps.
And you came away with all fingers and thumbs and were unharmed.
That yes, but it's really hard work. That's a really interesting lesson, because like we work on behind a desk all day and doing manual labor, like with the manual labor that is so repetitive, was a really interesting experience, I would say.
Did you feel you're able to, or did you feel any need to like convey a sense of weight behind the pieces, or was it more about the gamified and the sort of speed, the fun aspects, rather than a simulation, as it were?
I think this is a question for you, Tobias.
Yeah, so it's not intended to be like fun or a game. I mean, it can be fun, of course, but that's not like the main purpose of it. The main reason we did the whole experience is to evaluate people, so it's a simulation of tasks that are realistic to happen in the real world, even though you're probably not going to do one-to-one the same work later on.
Sure.
Regarding the weight of the pieces, maybe you could mention the interaction with.
Oh, yeah. We spend a lot of research in how you interact with objects that need 2 hands in the real world. So if you have like a heavy engine block that would be, I don't know, 10 kilograms, you have to pick it up with both hands, and otherwise it won't let you move it. And we also have a physical-based system, so you can't just push big objects through other objects. It will always block it on the surface. So you feel the weight of the heavy metal parts.
Right, right. Nice. And are you able to share some of the feedback from the client in terms of how they've used it and how they've seen people performing in it so far?
As far as I know, they are doing great so far. They're pretty content with it. I don't think I can share really how the current applicants are doing. But all the client overall felt that their needs were satisfied.
Right.
That's, I think, the most diplomatic answer I can give you.
And in terms of adoption as a whole through enterprise, how do you think VR is going in general beyond just your particular solution?
Well, I think the way into the market for VR is still enterprise. It's less consumer and more enterprise. And I think wherever you can break down the tasks that you ask of your employees or of your applicants, down on a level that does not require fine motor skills, like trying to turn tiny screws or something like that. This is something where it really fits in the in training or in assessing potential applicants. So I think this is the way forward for VR.
Mm-hmm. And Toby, are you pretty much in agreement with that?
Yeah, pretty much. And I think a big use case is if you have like factory lines and you want to train people on them, but it's very expensive to pause those lines to teach people how to work, then virtual reality is a great way to do that.
Mm-hmm. So what were some of the sort of key challenges in creating this particular solution from a code point of view?
Yeah, one of the biggest two problems were how to prevent people from sticking objects into other objects. So, for example, if you accidentally have a screw that you have to put in and it drops through a container or under the table, what do you do? Because the game state is never allowed to go into a situation where you cannot complete the task anymore. So we put in a lot of work to respawn parts, to make a system that doesn't allow you to put in a wrong place anyhow. And another big challenge was getting an accurate representation of your hands in virtual reality. So in the assessment, you have a model of your hands, and you can pick up pretty much every object around you. And we custom made every possible grab pose for every object. And that was a big challenge to get the feeling right that your fingers had the position you expect them when grabbing an object. But it worked out great in the end.
Yeah, also I think one big issue is that we are a small team. So basically it's not possible that creating all the mini games or the sequences is just in the hands of the programmers. So Toby, you basically created a whole system with a sequencer tool where I can easily, without any coding knowledge, create whole sequences of games and or basically create or adopt previously created games for new purposes.
Yeah.
That was, I think, a big part of why this worked so well.
Yeah. Clever. So this is something you can use again for other content at MEDIASQUAD for other clients or your own products?
Yeah, it's part of the internal tool set. We can use that for whatever project we feel like.
Nice. But
whenever you want to automate, where you want to have a sequence of interactions you want a user to do, we can use that system, and artists can just pretty much drag and drop the whole interaction together.
So, I mean, in terms of the representation for this particular solution, it's very high end, and you're using Wireless Vive Pro. Have you looked at sort of standalone? Do you see much interest in standalone, or are you focused just on the high graphical quality of PC VR?
We see a lot of interest in standalone VR applications, but those usually tend to be less complex, also less well choreographed, I would say, because with the stationary setup, what it allows us is that we can we know how big the play area will be, so we can design the experience around the fact that the user never has to teleport themselves, which allows us to give the experience so much detail and so much realism. In mobile, we do not have that, and the interaction is therefore much more limited. We have less control over what the user has on their end. so indirect, and so basically the whole experience will be less complex and less involved.
Right.
So for those big projects, I think stationary is still superior.
Okay.
Agreed.
Well, that's probably enough from me. This is called an Ask Me Anything, and it's not all just about me asking you. It's time to hand over to the audience, I think. So I'm going to bring up my host panel here, which means I have to put the mic down. And I'm going to allow hand raises. So anyone in the audience, if you've got a question, you can now push this little icon that's appeared, raise hand, and then I'll be able to see who's raising their hands and give you the mic, as it were. So if anyone's got any questions for the panel. Okay, no questions so far then, I'll carry on. Oh, there we go. Right, sorry. Chris has got a question. Chris, you are now on air. Oh,
cool.
And have the megaphone.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, this application now, is it something you think you can easily, you obviously made this for Rotax from the ground up, I guess. Is this something you think you can now make, like, transfer to other people, or do you think you'd have to start from scratch with a completely different production line? How easy would that be to transfer?
Well, this is something we talked about internally as well. Tobias, you already mentioned taking parts of what we developed and integrating it into other projects. With this assessment in particular, the problem is that the whole scenery that you see is modeled like an actual place at BRP Rotax. So they basically wouldn't allow us to share this with other people, with other companies, and B, it wouldn't make much sense. We have been in discussion whether it's better to reduce the amount of realism, or basically, is it worth not modeling the whole scene after a real place and giving up the immersion that the potential employees will feel if they do not feel right at home? Is it worth giving that up for a more general purpose application? And this is something we have been talking about and we are currently evaluating.
Cool.
Excellent. Chris, do you have another question whilst you're there? Because Dallas has just snuck in, so I'm going to hand over to Dallas if you don't have another question.
Yeah, please do. All good.
Okay.
Oh yeah, well, I just hopped in here, so sorry if you've answered this, but do you have like cross-platform support for things like the job training and job assessment, so somebody could hop in on their iPhone or on their iPad, or maybe the supervisor could watch on that?
Currently,
Or is it purely just a VR?
It's purely VR, and the supervisor can watch on a monitor and can intercept with UI on the monitor, but it's purely VR for the applicant.
Do you see a need for that, or you think that just makes it complicated? You think the VR is the better solution, or?
The whole experience is built around VR interaction, so there isn't much use for like tablet-based interaction or anything like that at the moment. And I think we don't have anything.
What about things like haptics? Just like auxiliary components to your experience. Is that on your radar at all, or? Say in job training, you could wear a glove that maybe makes them more sensitive to some sort of interaction.
We always keep those things in mind and are always basically on the fence for everything that's involving locomotion. Like we had those shoes that you can wear for walking around. I think this is more this will be more interesting once it gets more fleshed out. We did work a lot on the haptics with the controller. For example, Tobias mentioned before, we try to prevent people from sticking objects into the table. There is a task where you have to place objects on your workbench. And we had this issue where people always were putting them on the workbench, and because people in those assembly lines are trained to work really precisely and always like be gentle with motor parts, so they really try to place the objects on the table surface, and by doing so, with the thinner objects, they drop them through. So this was maybe one of the biggest challenges after in the stage where we tried it out with actual employees. And here we basically solved this problem using haptics from the Vive controller. Because the farther you push in an object, the more the controller vibrates. And this basically was enough. Once we implemented that, this issue did not occur anymore, because
It's very
you
interesting.
felt the interaction so much more.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And also your real hand doesn't move any further, but there's like a differently shaded hand that shows you where your real hand is, and the bigger the disparity gets between the real and the virtual position, the more you see the offset, and you reach the surface. There's not any more space to push.
Nice. Okay, thank you, Dallas. Any other questions? Aaron, let me give you control. There you go, you have the mic.
Hello, you mentioned that prior to working with you, the client was not using VR. And when you implemented this system, you implemented mini games. I'm curious if what they had before also involved games, or was it more of a traditional educational experience? Just would like to hear more about that.
All right. So the term minigames is something that we use internally, and I'm so used to it to always saying it. Officially we call them a test, but minigames is something that's yeah. Well, that's basically what it is. As far as I know, they did not have anything that compares with that with our job assessment. As far as I know, they basically did the usual application process, and if you looked like a suitable candidate, they gave you some easy task and gave you good supervision from seasoned workers, and well, evaluated at the end of the day, after the end of the week, and when you performed well, you got maybe some more complicated tasks, like you would do in any traditional company, I assume. So our assessment is, I don't think it's based on anything that they have a non-virtual reality and on to that.
Gotcha. That sounds great. It's not just the VR that you added. You really improved the overall assessment process, it sounds like.
Exactly. Yeah, we broke down, like, this was the what I mentioned in the very beginning. This was the week-long meeting that we had, where we, like, 1 week for 1 week had a workshop where we fleshed out what is it that you actually need. I'm sorry, the Altspace menu just popped up. What is it that you expect from your potential applicants, from your potential employees? How can we break this down? Does this work? Is this task relevant to all possible facilities? For example, we had some ideas that we had to scrap because those tasks are not relevant for their Mexican site. Some were only usable or relevant for Austria. So we basically had different variants of the same core test or minigame with just different content, especially made for other sites. This was, I think, the biggest challenge with the localization also.
Very cool. Thank you.
Right. So it wasn't just text and audio and voice. It was the actual interactions and pieces and parts, processes as well that were different.
Yes, there are variants. For example, sometimes the content changes, sometimes the parts change, and we basically did that for all the languages because why not? And sometimes they mix it up randomly, or they use one or the other.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. And in that process of designing the tests, can you walk us maybe through part of that sort of design thinking of not necessarily replicating one-to-one, as you say, what they would be doing, but how you choose parts that are relevant to form a valid test, but still remain appropriate?
Well, basically, you break down the task that you want to give the applicants to a really fundamental level. For example, we had what we wanted to do from the beginning was that we wanted to give them a long sequence of instructions that they have to remember, because this is basically the first thing that you will struggle with when working on the assembly line is, oh, what was the correct order of those steps? Which is the next step? Oh my God, have I done everything? And this was, for example, one thing that we wanted to have represented. So what we did was we came up with the idea of breaking this down to a game where you have to attach different parts, and using a screwdriver to screw down some screws, which are which are basically the interactions you do on the assembly line. It's just not necessarily the correct order, or it's not a single step, it's more steps combined into one. So we base it on a real task, break it down to a fundamental level, create a game action so we can score it, and then chain them together to form a whole test.
Right. Excellent. Thank you, Aaron. Chris, MSQ Chris, I fear you're being set up here, guys. Chris, you now have the mic.
I'm setting them up a bit. You mentioned that the site is in Austria and the other side is in Mexico. What do you do to get the updates, the support pushed out? What's going on there in the back end?
Toby, I think this is for you.
Yeah, so we created a launcher software that is capable of, on the one side, updating itself and downloading new VR version once we release them. And we pretty much can deploy updates to all sites worldwide in a matter of minutes. So there's no shipping of USB sticks or giving somewhere a download link or anything. It's all self-contained in a launcher software we created. That makes it really easy to fix anything if something would get broken at any time.
And it's also important, the version that you were using at the time is also noted in the score that you get. So should there be some changing of parts that would affect the score, you could trace back the steps and could prove that a certain score would have come from a previous version, which is not a problem now anymore, but when it was in development, obviously it was much more relevant. But also, should they in the future decide like to change up something, we always can trace back to which version you were scored on.
So on the scoring, how are you outputting that data? Does it link to like an HR system, or is it a manual process?
It's an automatic process. The game collects all of the interactions you've done, and with a raw rating of how you are very, how to put it. For example,
How well you performed.
did you do any mistakes? Did you like drop something and not report it, or did you do something in the wrong order? We keep track of all the interactions you do. Then we send those to our server backend, which does some magic algorithm that we can't talk in detail about. And you get your score on the backend and gets sent back to the client in the form of PDF that you can print or watch. And you have everything stored on the backend that is accessible with any browser if you want to look at it later on again.
And that backend is they have access to a client login area where they can view the reports and whatnot.
Right.
Exactly.
So, do you get any interest in terms of how this plugs into like an HR or learning system, beyond school, more, sort of using XAPI for this sort of the vast amounts of data that we can capture in VR?
I think for now they are pretty content with what we created for them, and so this is not getting into any more like let's say more involved analysis. This would also, I think, be a bit of a problem with the GDPR and general data protection. Especially in Austria, there are quite strong regulations on that. So I'm not sure if we can or should open this kind of worms with the current legal situation.
Sure. So we're coming towards the end now. Is there anything, any crazy sort of outcomes that you can share with the audience in terms of unexpected user behavior, where you thought you'd done a particularly good design, or people just went completely against it?
I think the do not lean on a table story is quite funny.
Yes, that's basically the most important thing when it comes to safety. We have done trainings before where people were asked to pick up objects to clean medical equipment, and they were in this process they had to lay themselves on the floor, and when they stood back up, because they were so used to it, used to working in this real facility that they were so used to, they tried to lean on the table of the equipment, which obviously in VR is not there, and this resulted in quite a lot of people tumbling to the floor again. Thankfully, I do not know of any issues, of any injuries that resulted from that, but this led to us basically reminding our applicants on every single game where there is any way, anything that even resembles something where you could potentially lean on, to warn them once again before they start that one test. Please do not lean on the table. It's not really there. I know it looks like it. It's not really there. And we implemented this warning, and it also happened with the guys from Rotax in testing, that the guys that are so used, they have it so much in their muscle memory that they took the table again for real. But thankfully, he remembered and did not lean on the table with his whole weight, and bounced back.
So was that just like a verbal warning in their ear, or did you actually incorporate something into the experience to make them realize?
It's a verbal warning. We also in the tutorial make them aware of the boundary grid of the Vive. They also have to trigger it, and we make sure that they know how it looks, what this means beforehand. With the please do not lean on the tables warning, they actually have to press it. They have to press OK, I got it, every single time.
Right.
Maybe that's a bit annoying, but it's really, really worth it, because since we implemented that, nobody has ever had this issue.
Nice. Okay. We did have a question from Helen, but I believe she's gone now. Any other questions? We have a few more minutes left. No? Okay. Is there anything you'd like to share with the audience in terms of what you learned specifically through creating this solution that would be useful for other people looking to provide content into enterprise?
I think really important with enterprise is make sure you have a constant exchange with the clients of what their actual needs are. What we learned from this is also like
keep all the interactions as simple as possible, because the
Yes.
applicants are most likely not used to virtual reality. So the whole user experience only needs one single button on the controller and nothing more, and do it step by step and slowly and guide them through the experience. Because
also regarding that,
yeah, continue.
Regarding that, no teleporting of any kind, because all of our players or all of the people that use this experience, they most likely have never used VR before. So if you try to introduce the concept of teleporting to them, that tends to not be a good idea, especially if they are under time pressure. So yeah, that maybe adds to the whole keep the interaction simple.
Right. And was there anything that you really wish you could have added to the experience, but either didn't have time or budget for?
For me, it was really fulfilling to finally be able to have an accurate representation of the hands. This was something that I have wished for before this project for a very long time, because it really helps, again, with simplifying the idea of your interactions. You have one button and it closes your hand. You can use this to press buttons or to grab objects or to grab a screwdriver. It's all the same button. It always makes basically the same interaction with your real hand. I'm really glad we could implement this time. Something that we would wish for next time, I don't know. Do you have something, Toby?
I mean, what would have been cool, and we could potentially do in the future, is always like newest ray tracing technology and whatnot. It wasn't available when we started the project, but making it more realistic and polish it to the maximum is always what we strive for.
Right. I mean, the hand side of things. Have you tried the Valve Index with the Knuckles controllers to give better sort of finger tracking?
Yes, we have done this before, I think, but we were not so satisfied with the results. I personally, I can't get them to work with my hands. Maybe I'm doing something wrong, but I always seem to like have issues with getting the finger detection to work properly. I also don't think they are as comfortable as the Vive controllers are.
Right.
Certainly more fragile, I assume, and this is also kind of important when your equipment changes like through 50 hands every day.
Yeah. We also tried.
Yeah, say keeping it simple.
We also tried the version where you do not use any controller at all. We basically just glued a leap motion onto the VR headset, and so which is a camera that does hand tracking, but that didn't work to our likings.
Yeah,
but we
right.
tried it out as well.
We have currently more luck with the Quest 2 finger tracking. That seems to work better for our purposes.
Okay. MSQ Chris is back with another question. You have the mic.
Thanks. Maybe to add in about the Valve Knuckles, everything that has, I mean, you have to imagine we have about 30 to 50 people per week on just one station to try this assessment. So the Knuckles with the part where you have the strap, they would tire out after 2-3 weeks tops, a month tops, with people going in and out of the VR all the time. So that's why basically we decided against them. So my biggest takeaway from this project was that hardware needs to be as robust as possible if you want to set it up in a professional environment, professional training environment, where there's put so much strain on it.
Sure. Thanks. I just thought of a question, but it's now escaped me again. Oh, yes. I guess we can't really do anything these days without mentioning COVID and lockdown. How have they been finding hygiene, and have they introduced new processes as a result?
Well, hygiene's always been an important topic for us because, as I mentioned, there are a lot of people going through those experiences, those assessments every day. So you really do not want to have sweat building up on the VR headset, for example. If you use a regular, what's it called? The regular
Facial
The
interface.
foam insert.
yes,
Foam,
exactly.
yeah.
The regular foam, it really soaks up the sweat, and you really do not want to be the last one to use that. So what we have is we have some facial tissue that we can that the applicants put on beforehand. So this creates already a fabric barrier between you and the headset, which is nice. Also, the clients receive instructions from us to how to clean and obviously to clean the equipment between each applicant. This all was before COVID. During COVID, this also delayed a bit of the production and the testing, especially because, well, when you shut down the whole facility, you cannot test 100 people with the new configuration. So this led to some delays, nothing too major. But yeah, we are currently now looking into how we can work around this issue. We have tried using facial masks with VR. It tends to create really heavy fog buildup in the headset, which is obviously annoying. So yeah, we basically recommend keeping distance, disinfecting the equipment between each applicant, and yeah, try to minimize the amount of people that you actually have to use the equipment. Unfortunately.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Oh, Dallas has got one more question just sneaking in there before we
On that subject,
wrap up.
Thinking about sanitization, have any UVC products popped up on your radar?
Some of them have popped up. We have seen them. So far, we have not deemed them necessary since we instruct our clients to disinfect the headset. Also, most of them use leather pads instead of the foam, which obviously is easier to clean.
Yeah, that's a must.
Exactly. So they basically have to use that. Otherwise, there is no way you're going to have a hygienic experience at all.
Yeah, good to know. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I think we're pretty much at time. Thank you everyone for attending this evening. I've been Sam Watts from Make Real. This has been Mathias and Tobias from MEDIASQUAD. They are winners of the AIXR VR Awards Enterprise Solution 2020. If you fancy being up here this time next year, then the nominations are opening soon for the VR Awards 2021. And the website details are available online. Follow them on Twitter and get your applications in. It's a relatively painful process. They're very fair, lovely judges, and ultimately we wish you all the best of luck. Have a great rest of your day, evening, and we shall see you all soon. Thank you.